This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
We're talking with M.E. Thomas, author of the book Confessions of a Sociopath, A Life Spent Hiding in Plain Sight. It's so fascinating. M.E. herself diagnosed as a sociopath, and in this takes us kind of on her journey and tells us what it's like thinking this way, and helps have us better understand how a mind like this works, as opposed to a neurotypical individual. The difference between living with this and living a productive life and, finding ways to get along with others, and those who end up taking this down a dark road. I know you had mentioned manipulating people was something that you wanted to learn to break away from. Obviously, some people go far beyond that into violent territory. Was that something that you felt it would have been easy to almost fall into, or is that takes another type of layer to a human being to take this further and darker?
I would say probably another layer. They're installing along the stretch of the freeway where I live, like a new type of guardrail, the cable kind. And I think, how many people must have died on this stretch of the freeway in order for them to spend the money on the guardrail?
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about guardrails recently, and most drivers, I've never seen an accident on that stretch of the freeway, but it must be happening, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't install it. And I think for a lot of people, they have the guardrail of, empathy is a big one, where they think, I could never do something bad to another person because I have this guardrail of empathy that makes me feel bad when I do it.
Sure.
So there's really no kind of incentive to do it. And I can see, if you don't have that guardrail of empathy and you don't have the guardrail of something else to kind of replace it, then I could see that if you were already inclined to hurting people, it would be easier and you probably would get more pleasure out of it than you would if not. It reminds me, I have a friend who is an alcoholic, and then, got out of rehab and I forget what the shot is, but it makes it so the alcohol doesn't have as much of the effect, and the idea is to try to disassociate that connection in your mind between, drinking the alcohol and getting pleasure, because the idea is you'll drink the alcohol, but nothing will happen. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have to, if you are conscientious enough, even as a psychopath, as a sociopath, to realize, some of these behaviors are really just going to lead me to a bad place. There are other things that you can kind of replace it with. For me, I grew up Mormon, and I found the teachings to be really light, and really I did appreciate them even as a child. I like to think, there's somebody named Jesus who loves me. It appealed to me, and it appealed to my grandiosity too, a little bit, because, especially in Mormon theology, kind of a little bit famously amongst Christian religions, the idea is that, there's the famous couplet, as God, or as man is, God once was. As God is, man can become. So the thought that we're all going to grow to be like God is like a Mormon tenet. And so I thought, that makes sense to me. I'm also going to be a God of worlds or whatever, right? In order to get there, though, you had to, sit still in church, and you had to do these things. And so I kind of got used to thinking, just like I can get the things that I want in school by just do my homework, and I can get the things I want in life by, go to law school. Yeah. And, I kind of just got used to doing that, where I thought, well, I can just do these things instead to get the things that I want. And I, even though I like the physicality of kind of violent activities, I've always been attracted to things like football, flag football, which really kind of gets a little rough, or I wanted for a while to be a roller derby skater.
Sure.
Yeah. I was or even World of Wrestling. We used to kind of pretend that, I've always liked, even when I surf, I don't mind crashing. I almost liked having my body thrashed around in the wave. There are things like that I enjoy. I never have had kind of bloodlust, but it is true that I know people that have. And I think, one thing about bloodlust, I think it's often associated with psychopaths, but I kind of think, psychopaths feel powerful. They tend to feel powerful and seek power too. But if somebody is somebody needs to hurt somebody in order to feel powerful, it feels to me, just my own reaction is that that person must feel weak, and I don't really relate to that.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Is it the extremes of behavior that is attractive? You had mentioned, some people getting pleasure out of hurting people, and to everyone, who doesn't have that, it's not something that you necessarily have pleasure, and it's an intense emotion if you hurt someone intentionally or accidentally, but it's not necessarily pleasurable. Is that something where, because there seems to be, or the volume is always very low and you're not necessarily, feeling things on a healthy level of others, that it takes such extremes, and you're attracted to such extremes because it does make you feel something? My example would be like in a murderous type situation where a killer goes and does something extreme. Stabs a bunch of people, for example, like the Brian Kohberger situation and the allegations against him. He talked about not having an ability to feel, not feeling empathy, not feeling anything when he's hugging grandparents, and it like switched over for him in his youth. All of a sudden, those feelings were just gone, and he didn't know where or why it happened, but they weren't there. Is it like the only way you can kind of get that? I don't want to say rush, but just a ability to feel something that makes individuals with that are sociopathic, in some cases, carry out violent crimes?
It's a good question. I think I should pause and say that I think a lot of kind of the most famous killers are not sociopaths. Like, probably the only ones I think are like, Ted Bundy.
Sure.
Super charming guy or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know that much about that many of them, but like Jeffrey Dahmer just seems like he has like a mood disorder or something. But if it's true that somebody's saying they don't feel anything and that they feel that they kind of need that sort of stimulation, it's a little bit like the existential angst that I was referencing, about, when I was a younger person, kind of in my 20s, is when I started to feel this existential angst, where I realized, it's kind of a superpower to not care what anybody thinks. Yeah. But then the flip side of it is you don't take anything personally. And if you don't take anything personally and you don't really have a sense of self, there's never self-expression for you. Like, nothing matters. Everything has like this absurdist quality, kind of like the French absurdist writers, where there's nothing that seems to matter. And then you always hope that that's not true. You always hope that finally something is going to matter to you. And there's almost like a craving to prove to yourself that something does matter. So I could kind of see this with people like that. I probably don't think it's like thrill seeking, something like that, something such a big splash. Maybe it is to finally feel like, this actually did matter to me. Because if nothing matters to you, then life seems meaningless. And if life seems meaningless, then, there's a huge existential chasm that you're going to constantly be experiencing in terms of like, why am I alive? What am I even here for? What's the purpose of consciousness? It's very, I would imagine, unsettling to experience it. I've experienced it like just a little bit in terms of boredom, but I imagine if your brain has been disconnected so much, either through like psychopathy or from whatever else, there could be a brain tumor, or there could be anything else that's kind of disconnecting you from like a sense that of meaninglessness, or a sense of meaning, I guess, disconnect you from a sense of meaning, then that would be so haunting. I can't imagine like life lived that way. If you didn't turn to suicide, it seemed like you would turn to like very outrageous behavior, because I have sensed, this existential angst just a little bit. And it's the worst feeling in the world. Like, you could not live that way. And it was finally what caused me to, be like, I'll give up some of the superpowers of psychopathy and make a huge change in my life, because I was like, I cannot keep living this way. Yeah. Something has to be different.
I mean, would sociopaths turn to suicide often? Or if there's that lack of feeling there, is there depression? I mean, does depression exist for one like that if the emotions aren't there to begin with?
I wouldn't call it depression. I would just say it's an extreme lack of engagement with the world. Yeah, where like nothing seems to kind of stimulate you, nothing seems to kind of engage you. And a lot of psychopaths I talk to describe this as boredom.
Okay.
So it's boredom, but they feel it in such a physical, oppressive way, worse than being sick, worse than being so sick that you need to be hospitalized. That's how they feel it, and they dread it.
Yeah.
And so they do things to try to avoid the boredom. So some of this, stimulating kind of things, they're just trying to find something that engages them.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers
The
Podcast
Hidden Killers Podcast.
with Tony Bruschi.
Still have more coming up with M.E. Thomas, so be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts so you don't miss any more of that conversation. It's coming to you just a little bit right here on this very feed. If you want to follow any of the cases on a specific channel, we got it for you. The links of all of our podcast channels in the episode description. Be sure to check that out. Get a commercial-free experience through Apple Podcasts right now as well. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.